January 26, 2020. A Sikorsky S-76B crashed in Calabasas. Basketball superstar Kobe Bryant, his 13-year-old daughter Gianna, and 7 other people tragically died. After the incident, rumors swirled. Some said that behind this air crash must be a huge conspiracy, because the experienced pilot during the flight allegedly made several basic errors. This made people wonder what hidden reasons were behind his strange behavior. Some even claimed Kobe had left last words. For a time, various rumors ran rampant. The truth became blurred. So what exactly happened that year? Let's first travel back 4 years to take everyone through the cause and effect of this crash. Los Angeles County, a county in the southern part of California. After the gold rush, Los Angeles County gradually became the most populous county in the U.S. According to the latest 2020 data, Los Angeles County's population exceeded 9.8 million. The Santa Monica Mountains to the south are near the Pacific. This causes moisture from the ocean to cool as it gains altitude, and clouds build up in the basin, forming large areas of low clouds. This also set the stage for this air crash. January 26, 2020. It was a Sunday. At 9:06 a.m., Kobe, along with his daughter Gianna, boarded a flight to Camarillo Airport. The aircraft was a Sikorsky S-76B helicopter. Registration number N721X. This helicopter was manufactured in 1991, equipped with 2 Pratt & Whitney PT6B36A turboshaft engines. It was certified for visual flight rules and instrument flight rules. However, the aircraft was not equipped with a black box, nor a terrain awareness and warning system. This system provides warnings when the aircraft approaches terrain or obstacles. Furthermore, the cockpit voice recorder by Island Express, after they took possession of the helicopter in August 2015, was removed. The company changed the 12-seat configuration to 8 seats and added luxury interiors, etc. Everything was just to give clients a better experience. Let's briefly introduce Island Express. It is a company providing private charters and round-trip scheduled helicopter services to Santa Catalina Island. Although it has a long history, its management wasn't great. Since 1985, it had been involved in 4 accidents, and the responsible party was always this company. The sole pilot for this flight was 50-year-old Ara Zobayan. He had a total flight time of 577 hours, including experience piloting the Sikorsky S-76B of about 250 hours. And as Island Express's chief pilot, he had been flying in the Los Angeles area for nearly 10 years. He was very experienced, but it's worth noting, although he was instrument rated, he only had 75 hours of actual instrument flight experience, and of that, over 68 hours were accumulated in simulated instrument meteorological conditions. This was his weakness. Previously, Zobayan had flown Kobe's family dozens of times. Whenever Kobe needed helicopter service, he specifically requested Zobayan as the pilot. They had long since become good friends and trusted each other. Kobe's preference for using helicopters was not a recent thing. Back in an interview in December 2018, he stated he once missed his daughter's school performance due to traffic. Los Angeles traffic is getting worse and worse. Traffic picking up my daughter from school, traffic on the way to practice. It messed up my schedule. Therefore, he started using helicopters to travel. Today's trip was originally scheduled to depart at 9:45. Kobe's daughter Gianna was at the Mamba Sports Academy, participating in a youth basketball tournament, and Kobe was coaching. Kobe was also very dedicated to his daughter's basketball career. Young Gianna also dreamed of one day entering the WNBA, Women's National Basketball Association. Therefore, Kobe decided to leave 45 minutes early at 9 o'clock, so he could see how the other teams played. If all went well, the flight would take half an hour, covering a distance that takes over 2 hours by car. At 9:06 a.m., the helicopter took off smoothly from John Wayne Airport. They would first fly north over Burbank, then west to Camarillo Airport. This flight was operating under Visual Flight Rules, VFR. Zobayan would use Interstate 5 and Highway 101 as references to get Kobe's group to their destination. And just yesterday, Zobayan had flown them on a round trip. The weather was even worse then, so he was very confident in completing today's mission.
2 Echo X-ray, Burbank Tower, Burbank altimeter 3019, Burbank class Charlie, surface area is IFR, stay intentions.
Yes, we can maintain special VFR, action for special VFR transition on the 101 westbound 2.
So according to regulations, Zobayan should have flown under Instrument Flight Rules, IFR, or waited for the weather to improve before continuing. Here's a simple explanation of three closely related but distinct concepts in aviation: visual flight, instrument flight, and instrument meteorological conditions. Imagine you are piloting a helicopter, soaring under blue skies, and ground references are clearly visible. This is an ideal visual flight environment. Under these conditions, the pilot primarily relies on visual observation to fly, having greater freedom. However, when dark clouds gather, visibility gradually decreases, and ground references are obscured by fog. When it reaches a certain point, you enter what is called Instrument Meteorological Conditions, IMC. In this situation, the pilot must rely entirely or partially on instruments to maintain direction and altitude. This is instrument flight, IFR. Compared to visual flight, instrument flight is like flying on an invisible track. There are strict approach and departure procedures, and every move must follow ATC instructions. This is not only time-consuming and labor-intensive, but also makes many pilots feel constrained. Local helicopter pilots often complained about this. Clearly, instrument flight did not align with Island Express's philosophy. Their clients sought efficiency. Moreover, Island Express was not certified for IFR operations. However, they had another solution. That is, when visibility was below the VFR requirement of 3 miles, they could apply to use Special Visual Flight Rules, SVFR. Zobayan did just that. Special VFR is essentially VFR with relaxed limits. As long as visibility is not less than 1 mile, they can continue flying.
November 2 Echo X-ray, hold outside Burbank class Charlie airspace. I have an aircraft going around.
2 Echo X-ray holding.
Just like that, they circled in place for over 10 minutes before finally being cleared to proceed. They would follow Interstate 5, turn onto Highway 118, and pass through Van Nuys airspace. Because Highway 118 does not go directly to Camarillo Airport, they would then turn onto Highway 101, follow the highway west, and arrive in Camarillo.
Van Nuys helicopter 2 Echo X-ray with you for the special VFR transition. We are currently at 1400.
Helicopter 72 Echo X-ray Van Nuys Tower, wind calm, visibility 2 1/2, ceiling 1100 overcast, Van Nuys altimeter 3016. Cleared into Van Nuys class Delta, northeast of Van Nuys along the 118 freeway westbound. Advise when you're in VFR conditions or when you're clear of the Van Nuys class Delta. Transition at or below 2,500 permitting.
Between Captain Zobayan and Van Nuys Tower, we know the cloud ceiling was at 100 feet, but their flight altitude was 400 feet. This means they were already flying in the clouds. This is not allowed under VFR, or even Special VFR. Furthermore, their flight altitude was very low, and they were already in danger.
Tower report 2 Echo X-ray, can we go ahead and start turning to the southwest close to 11?
Helicopter 2 Echo X-ray approved, and are you transitioning in VFR condition?
Helicopter 72 Echo X-ray SoCal approach, roger. You just going to stay down low at that for all the way to Camarillo?
Yes, sir, low altitude 2 Echo X-ray.
But the problem he faced now was the Santa Monica Mountains ahead. Flying too low would cause an unstable radar signal. More critically, fog had accumulated in the basin, forming thick, low clouds. Continuing VFR was clearly not feasible. Zobayan's correct course of action should have been to contact ATC, land at the nearest airport, or wait for the weather to clear. But, unexpectedly to everyone, this ace pilot once again chose to take a risk.
SoCal 4 helicopter 2 Echo X-ray, we're going to go ahead and start our climb to go above the layers, and we're going to stay with you here.
2 Echo X-ray, where are you?
Increased altitude, trying to fly above the cloud layer. Unfortunately, SoCal Approach had just switched to a new controller. They needed to exchange information again.
X-ray ident.
Ident.
2 Echo X-ray, what is the intention?
We're climbing to 4,002 Echo X-ray.
And then what are you going to do when you get to altitude? 2 Echo X-ray, you're still too low level for flight following at this time.
The helicopter's descent rate was as high as 400 feet per minute, ultimately crashing into the ground at a speed of 160. The helicopter instantly disintegrated and triggered a small fire. All 9 people on board were killed. The crash site was in Calabasas. A man at the scene quickly dialed 911. We could hear this aircraft, but we didn't see anything. Just heard a loud boom, and then a fire started. Emergency firefighters and Los Angeles local police arrived at the scene. The fire was quickly extinguished. The scene was horrific. From Kobe's autopsy report, it was clear his lower body and right arm were missing. His face was severely injured, and brain matter was exposed. There were also multiple burns on his body. The cause of death for him and the other 8 was blunt force trauma. When this news broke, countless fans were heartbroken. Many celebrities also expressed their condolences. And with widespread media coverage, more and more questions from the public arose. For example, this happened only a few years after Kobe retired. There must be a conspiracy. Pilot Zobayan was so experienced. Why did he take off in heavy fog? Kobe must have forced him. Additionally, 8 Los Angeles deputies privately possessed photos of the remains. Their act of privately sharing the photos was met with strong opposition from Kobe's widow, Vanessa. One deputy was allegedly laughing while sharing the photos, while another deputy, allegedly called the victims, remains hamburgers and piles of meat. Vanessa stated this behavior was disrespectful to the deceased and caused secondary trauma to the families. She later sued the police and fire departments and was awarded $16 million in damages. The cause of the crash was undoubtedly the public's main concern. After a preliminary investigation by the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, it was found that the aircraft had no mechanical failures. The crash was likely due to human factors. But this helicopter had no black box and no cockpit voice recorder. This created immense difficulty for the investigation. The NTSB appealed to the public to provide photos and videos from the scene on the day of the incident. Fortunately, because the helicopter was flying at a low altitude at the time, it caught the attention of many people, so they obtained a lot of footage of the helicopter on the day of the incident, ultimately through ATC audio recordings, ADSB, automatic dependent surveillance broadcast data, and numerous clues. The investigation team reconstructed the crash sequence. First, the pilot, Zobayan. His skills were beyond question. Zobayan was not only Island Express's chief pilot, but also an instructor. His performance in various training exercises was excellent, including training for recovery from IMC and unusual attitudes. But Island Express had one vulnerability: only one pilot during flights. This puts immense pressure on the pilot. Moreover, it was difficult for the company to detect if pilots were violating procedures. Before takeoff, the pilot and company would conduct a risk assessment, although the manager found cloud cover along the flight path. Out of trust for Zobayan, the manager did not intervene much. After all, just yesterday, in worse weather, Zobayan completed the mission smoothly. But on this VFR flight, he repeatedly entered clouds, which was a clear violation of procedures. Typically, when inadvertently entering IMC, there is a standard procedure. First, reduce speed, then use autopilot to climb above the clouds, and finally, declare an emergency and contact ATC for assistance. The investigation showed Zobayan was very familiar with this procedure. He even set safety standards for all pilots. But what did he actually do during the flight? After entering the clouds during VFR flight, he did not slow down. Instead, he accelerated and climbed. Ultimately, right up until the crash, he never declared an emergency. This was the complete opposite of his training. This was not right. Therefore, people speculated it was Kobe's assertiveness that forced Zobayan to take the risk. But according to a former Island Express pilot, Kobe never pressured them and was very polite. There had been times when Kobe's trips were canceled due to weather, and he had no complaints. After all, safety is more important than anything, right? Perhaps the problem lay in the relationship between Zobayan and Kobe. As mentioned, Zobayan had become Kobe's de facto personal pilot. Kobe specified Zobayan for every trip. They gradually became good friends. Zobayan was also recognized as an ace pilot. These accolades and Kobe's unconditional trust caused him to constantly raise his own expectations. He didn't want to inconvenience Kobe's travel. This, in turn, crushed him. Earlier, waiting for another aircraft's go-around delayed them by over 10 minutes, so he felt very anxious, wanting to make up for the lost time. Even though the mountainous area ahead was covered in fog, he flew straight into it. Looking at the crash site, it was less than 40 kilometers from Camarillo Airport. Another 10 minutes of flying, and he could have landed, so he chose to take a gamble. This was precisely the influence of planned continuation bias. Flying into the clouds wasn't the most fatal mistake, because this aircraft was actually capable of instrument flight. If Zobayan had strictly followed IFR and requested ATC assistance, or if he had followed standard procedure to slow down and engage the autopilot, this tragedy could have been avoided. But he chose to trust his own senses, which caused him to experience spatial disorientation. Initially, the helicopter was indeed climbing, but when Zobayan could no longer see the ground, spatial disorientation occurred. At this time, the most important thing for a pilot to avoid is moving their head, because doing so could very likely cause the Coriolis illusion. This would make the pilot seriously misjudge the aircraft's attitude. The final straw was the SoCal approach controller change. The new controller asks Zobayan to press the ident button. This button makes the helicopter flash on the ATC radar. This should have been a very simple action, but at this moment it was fatal. Zobayan was distracted by this and moved his head. Instantly, his perception of the helicopter's attitude became critically flawed. Even though the helicopter was gradually banking left, he still thought it was climbing. As for why he wasn't looking at his instruments, it's speculated after the fact that one reason was his instrument flight experience was too limited. Second, he was convinced at that moment the helicopter was climbing, so his attention was entirely outside the window, looking for a new visual reference. The result was that, right up until the crash, he likely never realized the helicopter was rapidly descending. The reason spatial disorientation is so deadly is that the human body was not designed with flight in mind. When an aircraft banks slowly enough, the vestibular system cannot perceive this subtle change. The pilot will believe they are still flying level. The various illusions caused by spatial disorientation are precisely why, in instrument meteorological conditions, one must use instrument flight. To use an imperfect analogy, one night, you are walking alone on a road, and suddenly all light sources go out. It's pitch black in front of you. You've lost all reference points. If you try to rely on your own senses, it's very hard to find your way home. At this time, you should take out your phone, turn on the GPS and the flashlight to guide you. Follow the GPS. But the situation a pilot faces is far more complex and difficult. Not only do they lose their sense of direction, it's even hard to judge the aircraft's pitch and roll. On February 9, 2021, after more than a year of investigation, the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, held a press conference and confirmed the probable cause of the crash. The pilot's decision to continue VFR flight into instrument meteorological conditions resulted in the pilot's spatial disorientation and loss of control. The cause was likely the pilot's self-induced pressure and planned continuation bias, which adversely affected his decision-making. Island Express's review and oversight of its safety management processes were also insufficient after Kobe and the others perished. Some reports claimed Kobe had last words, but based on the situation at the time, Kobe had no time to leave any last words. All 9 people died very shortly after the helicopter crash. Additionally, Kobe's widow Vanessa sued Island Express, alleging the company's safety procedures were flawed and the primary cause of the accident was the pilot's improper operation. Island Express, in turn, sued the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, arguing that the air traffic controller's radio calls during a critical phase of flight, requesting transponder idents, etc., distract